Hello everyone, Time to Grind here, and today I wanted to talk about something that has made me very passionately angry. Now, if you guys don't know, for the last couple days, what's been going on in the Star Wars Battlefront 2 community, there has been quite a lot going on. It came out that it takes around 40 hours to unlock the heroes in the game, like Darth Vader and stuff, if you're not going to spend money on the microtransactions in a $60 game. And so, you know, if you're not going to spend money on the microtransactions and you're just going to grind it out and be a free-to-play player, it's going to take you 40 hours. And by the way, I want to point something out. When you're playing Hearthstone and you're going on the subreddit and you're, say, talking about how expensive the game is, or, you know, how friendly the new player experience is, that's a case where you could say, hey, I'm a free-to-play player, or, you know, I'm not a free-to-play player, I do pay money on the game. That's fine to say, because it is a free-to-play game, and, you know, if someone has not spent any money and, you know, they want to give their opinions about something, you know, say a free-to-play player in Hearthstone has played the game for a year, has done their dailies for a year, and they want to give a little, you know, narrative of what it was like for them to be a free-to-play player. Good on them, because the game is free and they can be a free-to-play player. I have heard some people talking about Star Wars Battlefront 2 as, like, them describing themselves, or the way they will be, as a free-to-play player. And first of all, this isn't even really relevant to what I'm talking about fully, but I just want to point that out. They're saying that they are going to be a free-to-play player after purchasing a $60 game in 2017. Now, you know, a lot of people are like, oh, you know, all the future, you know, DLC will be free. It's funding future development. That is a slippery slope. That is what I told myself when I told myself that loot boxes in Overwatch were okay. In fact, up until recently, I was still pretty much fine with it, except now that I see what me and so many other people have done to the gaming industry. By saying you're okay with the Overwatch loot boxes because it funds future development, you're saying, okay, you know, I'm okay with loot boxes. I might not have been okay with it, but I'll accept it. And developers will take that and they'll be like, okay, well, now they've fully accepted loot boxes in their game. How can we push it even further? And then, you know, we see pay-to-win loot boxes. And, you know, there's a huge outrage just like there was with original loot boxes. And if we don't continue to keep pushing against this, we will see that become the norm. And then developers like Activision patenting, you know, manipulative systems, they'll be like, hey, how can we push these pay-to-win loot boxes even farther? And that's when they, you know, do their whole Activision, you know, patent thing that pairs you up and manipulates you and stuff like that. And I used to, you know, even like I said, up to recently, was okay with that. And now seeing what the game industry does with that acceptance, I am no longer okay with that, and I will definitely be more cautious in the future, because I was okay with it. I made the mistake, and the gaming industry was like, hey, people are okay with this now, how can we go even further? And that's something I want to point out, because, you know, people would try to argue with me about how loot boxes, you know, even like looking at Jimquisition's. I remember watching Jimquisition's Overwatch review, and he was talking about how it would not be a running for his Game of the Year, you know, his Game of the Year list, because it had microtransaction in the AAA title game. And I thought he was just being, you know, he was overreacting. You know, they're cosmetic only. What's the problem? And I realize now he was just, you know, smarter than all of us, because he knew that the industry would do this to it, you know, to us. And going back to the point I was making a little bit earlier, when people after spending $60 are calling themselves free-to-play players in a non-free-to-play game, that's when you know we really have a problem. And unlike a lot of other issues, it seemed like the Star Wars Battlefront, you know, community and the gaming community as a whole understood this. They were actually outraged. All over the Star Wars Battlefront subreddit, there were things talking about boycotting the game, you know, everyone canceling their pre-orders. And I've seen this a lot, but not to this extent. This has gone above and beyond the call to duty, you know, of being a good gamer person. And there was actually a post, or a comment by one of the EA people, talking about how, you know, they were pretty much defending the 40-hour grind, because they're like, we want to make it rewarding. We want to make it so much, you know, we want to make it feel so good once you finally unlock Darth Vader after 40 hours of grinding. And that comment now it's the most downvoted comment on all of Reddit of all time. Right now, as of recording this video, it has 500,000 downvotes, and that's ridiculous. And everything else, you know, they tried to comment, you know, has been downvoted and, you know, fueled with hate. And I do want to bring up something else. A lot of the, you know, people that have been working on the game, they've been talking about how they've been getting death threats and stuff like that, and that is taking it 100% too far. You know, you can go from 0 to 100 and be super aggressive and, you know, downvote them, you know, 500,000 times. That is one thing. But, you know, sending death threats to someone is never okay, ever, as, you know, if you're a civilized person. So, I just want to point that out. You know, you got to defend EA a little bit on that. You know, don't send their developers death threats. That is not a good thing. You are not a good person for doing that, although we understand why you're angry, but don't do that. And I'm sure, you know, most people aren't doing that because I think, you know, it's not something the normal, you know, normal human thinks is a good idea. But nonetheless, EA definitely was taken aback by all of this. They didn't expect, you know, gamers to unite as much as they did. And there were a lot of talks about, you know, the stocks for EA going down a little bit, and stuff along with the lines of that. And actually, one thing I wanted to bring up was GameSpot, you know, one of the game reviewer, you know, websites and companies and stuff like that. They purchased $100 worth of loot crates. And, you know, because stuff like when you get duplicates and whatnot, you get the credits that you can then buy what you really want. They purchased $100 worth of loot crates, and they only got half the amount of credits needed to unlock Darth Vader or Luke. Think about that. So that means that if you want Darth Vader or Luke, you are going to have to spend about $200 to get the game. Or not to get the game, to get the, you know, characters. And keep that in mind. They're releasing a Star Wars game that you can either spend $200 after the original $60 to play, or grind for 40 hours. Now, a lot of you know, are probably thinking, hey, you know, they actually changed stuff. They released, you know, they made the cost of them cheaper, and that's true. You know, a couple hours after all of that, after recording this video, or not after, you know, after that article went up, they reduced the credits needed to unlock the top heroes by 75%, which means that instead of it taking 40 hours to grind, say, Darth Vader, it now takes 10 hours, and that also means it'll probably only cost, like, you know, not doing math because math is hard, that'll cost around, like, you know, $35, $40 to unlock Darth Vader. Now, keep that in mind. $10, you know, a lot of people are like, oh my god, they really reduced that a lot. I still want to point out the fact that it is still costing $30 to $40 to buy Darth Vader after a $60 purchase, or spending 10 hours grinding the game to get even, not just all the heroes, just a single hero. So you want Darth Vader and Luke? That's now 20 hours or like $80. And that's absurd. And even if they got rid of those in particular, or even if they reduced it even more and made, you know, what's already, even if they did 75% of what it is already now, the game is still, there are still pay-to-win loot boxes in the game. And there's a lot of talk, you know, on especially people on the subreddit, you know, talking about how this is exactly what they expected. You know, EA pushed as hard as they could for the most scummy and disgusting payment model they got, and when people were outraged, which they have a perfectly good right to do, and B, they're like, oh, okay, you know, we hear you guys, we're Star Wars fans too, we're gamers as well, we understand this, we'll make some changes. And they make changes, but they don't solve the root of the problem, because that's not their intention in the first place. So yes, they did quote-unquote listen to their fans, and they, you know, respected people's opinions, and yeah, they made it cost, you know, 75% less credits. But guess what? That EA is still happy. You know, although could it have been better? Could they have gotten people to spend even more money? Of course. But what matters to them is now people are, you know, a lot of people, obviously people like myself, there are a lot of people that are still angry and not okay with this. But there are a lot of people that are like, oh, okay, you know, EA actually listened. I'm going to go ahead and still continue to pre-order the game. And when the game comes out, I'll continue to support a system that has pay-to-win loot boxes. And you know, in one of my earlier videos, a couple of weeks ago about loot boxes in general, I said, you know, hey, if you really want to play the game and enjoy it, you know, go on, you know, good for you. I don't have a right to tell you not to buy it. But one thing, you know, back then I said, you know, a lot of people were talking about, you know, kind of boycotting Star Wars Battlefront 2, telling them, and I kind of, you know, was like, oh yeah, it'll work exactly the same as it always has. This is like the most, like, outrage I have ever seen a fan base get, and that is that's very good. So I would highly recommend, you know, a lot of you guys to actually, you know, hold off from buying the game. Maybe wait and see if even more changes happen. But the ultimate thing that I'm trying to get across in this video is EA knowingly went with a super scummy, maybe possibly more scummy than they originally wanted, system in their game. That way, when outrage happened, because they knew there was going to be outrage, they can be like, oh, okay, you know, we'll adjust things, we'll make some changes, and there you go. I hope you guys are happy. The thing is if Star Wars if EA, they released Star Wars Battlefront 2, and by default, it, you know, had the changed currencies already, people would still be outraged. And then they'd be like, okay, we'll change it, and we'll make it only take 2 hours to grind a character. But they went so absurd that they can be like, okay, we'll cut the prices 75%. And to a lot of people, they're like, oh my god, I'm so happy you're doing that. That's so great. But they're still getting what they want. They are still, most fans now are okay with pre-ordering and buying Star Wars Battlefront 2, which has pay-to-win loot boxes in it. And that is something that I am not ready to accept in the gaming industry, because, like I talked about earlier, if we continue to accept this stuff, it is not going to be good. Because the next step, you know, you might be okay with this, what comes after this? And that's pretty much kind of what I wanted to go on my little rant about today after seeing everything on the Star Wars Battlefront subreddit. But if you guys enjoyed this video, then consider leaving a like down below and subscribing to see more content and news. And like always, guys, see you next time.